It's the Final Word Cricket Podcast. Adam Collins here at the Oval in London. Beautiful day. We've done a lot of interviews here over the years, but not many with Australian cricketers. Got one of them sat opposite me in the Bedser stand beneath the dressing room here. Adam Zampa, welcome to the show.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. I read a great interview you did in The Guardian with Jim Wallace the other day, which talked to how much you actually want to be here in London, in the UK, playing in the 100, a tournament that agrees with you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in terms of franchise cricket, location, the standard, the atmosphere, and then just the group that I'm lucky to be a part of here as well. It's just I only played 3 games here last season, but I left wanting more. So luckily enough, Moods got me back. I was in his ear quite a bit about getting me back, but I'm back. And yeah, just it's one of those places you can bring your family and feel really comfortable. Being a part of a London team as well means you only have to leave London 3 times for games. Little things, but I really enjoy it. Favorite things, 65-minute innings. 85 is getting a little bit too long in T20 cricket, if you ask me, especially some franchise tournaments. The IPL, it's almost like 100 minutes for an innings, whereas this one, it's just short and sharp, and the crowd love it. You're in and out. Even thinking back to the game the other night, 9 p.m. The game's done a little bit early, but it's 9 p.m. and the crowd's still here. The sun's just going down. I love it. Love the vibe.
And some success taking 3 wickets in that first game. So you started well. I suppose the other way of interpreting it would be that there is bigger money to be made at this time of year in the MLC. A lot of your Aussie teammates are doing that. We saw overnight it was Steve Smith captaining Maxwell and Head on one team, Cummins playing on the other team. And you had played in that tournament before the MLC, but you've actually made the decision to take, I suppose, less money, but to do it on your terms here. You've reached that part of your career where we're doing things on your terms.
Yeah, I mean, pre-World Cup last year, I think there was a lot of thought about what, depending on how the team went in the World Cup, what it might look like after. And, if I didn't do well in that World Cup, what it might look like for me as well. And I was pretty realistic about that. I was lucky to go on and do well and be part of a winning World Cup team. So, we celebrated that. And then looking forward, I was like, okay, the franchise thing isn't for me. I want to keep playing for Australia for as long as I can. The success and the feeling of success in that team is something that I want more of. So I'm lucky enough to have signed a 2-year deal with Australia, and it was basically on the basis of wanting to play every game for Australia. And it meant that I had to make some decisions around franchise cricket. Obviously pulled out of the MLC, pulled out of the IPL, and I basically needed to prioritise some franchise cricket over others. And when I look at the 100, all the things that I talked up about it before, and then the other things you got to take into consideration, like the fact that we've got a tour here afterwards, it just made sense to play the 100 this year. It's family friendly. We're in South London by the park in Clapham, 5 minutes from a playground, 5 minutes from the park, 5 minutes from a cafe. It's just, it all made a lot more sense. But yeah, I did play the MLC last year. It was a great experience. But in terms of competitions, couldn't speak more highly of the 100. I really, truly love it.
You mentioned London a couple of times and you'll want to be here. I remember interviewing you down here over ground in, would have been 2017 Champions Trophy. You had a bit of a George Michael era going on at the time. Might have been the first time I saw the mullet. I can't remember it exactly. But I was pondering this in preparing for the interview. A lot of people, when they're, 24, get the 2-year working visa, they fuck off over here, they have a terrific time, then they go home, or they stay, like I've done. But because you've been a professional cricketer, there's been really no room for you to have that experience and to be just living in a different city. So clearly London agrees with you, but also I suppose the anonymity of being in a city which isn't always cricket mad. I guess you might jump on the bus or jump on the tube and do things that normal people would have done maybe when they're in their mid-20s.
Yeah, I played for Essex probably 6 or 7 years ago for 2 seasons, and I stayed in London as well. Hence, I stayed East London that time. But, for me, it's I live on a farm now, and I don't necessarily enjoy big cities, but if I'm going to spend time in one, London, it speaks to me. Yeah, I mean, the fact that we can call it home for a month, really settle in as well. You're not going to and fro to different places, getting on flights is the other thing about England as well. You're a car ride away or a bus ride away from your destination. So it's, I really like that about England. Enjoying London. I love the busyness, the culture, the restaurants, the whole shebang. No, like, mind you, I get over it quickly as well. Like, I'm sure by the end of this tournament I'll be done with London. But that's the best thing about how I've set up my life, is that I could go back home, go to the farm, shut the gate, and don't have to see anyone for a while.
So there's no tension for you on that front. You having made the decision to live a more rural life in Australia, but that's where you sort of see maybe not the rest of your life, but in the medium term, you'll be living in a situation more like that rather than.
Yeah, I've found my forever home. Like, and while I'm playing cricket and working, it's nice to be able to come to places like this. But I love being home. Hence, that going back to that conversation about franchise cricket and making those decisions. It also boils down to the fact that I love being home, love where I live, and I really don't want to be away that much.
So with these interviews, what we tend to do is go to where you are right now, plus London, and then we go back and put you back to where this all started for you. And I guess leggies and bowling leg breaks, what I say to anyone over here when playing is any Australian of a certain age can rip a leg break, because of course I was watching Shane Long when growing up. But with you, it was a function of the bowling restrictions, the dreaded bowling restrictions for quicks as teenagers. You could only bowl so many overs and you've got to stop for the rest of the day, and that gave you an opportunity. But kind of interested, where did it go from to something that you could do in your driveway or your backyard into something that, no, this is me now, I'm going to be a guy doing the thing that's the most volatile craft in cricket, bowling leg breaks?
Like as you mentioned before, I wanted to do everything when I was young. I wanted to bowl in-swingers, out-swingers, fast, wicket keep, open the bat. I wanted to bowl 10 overs straight. I wanted it all. And then once I got to a stage where I was playing guys older than me, kids older than me, and I was on bowling restrictions, I was like, I need the ball in my hand, and how do I do that? And my dad pulled me aside one day, and we had a really good relationship. Me and my dad, we still best mates. But in terms of like him being my cricket coach and being honest about it, we got into some hasty arguments around batting and like biggest dummy spits ever training, but it was a good relationship. And he basically pulled me aside and said, "There's so many batters out there. You're not going to be big enough and strong enough to bowl fast. How about you just stick to leggies? That's how they go." And I was like, "Yeah, all right." That was probably at the age of maybe 14. And I was doing a little bit of both up until 15. And then 15, I was like, "All right, let's have a crack at it." And then by the time I was 15, I was getting picked in representative stuff for South Coast and Southern Zone, and so he's actually working for the 100 now. His name's Trent Woodhill. He's had a lot to do with the 100 for people that don't know, but he kind of scouted me from the age of 15 or 16, and I wouldn't be where I am now without him finding me when I was that young and backing me for basically every year to come.
It's quite interesting. Trent's known as the power hitting batting coach. He told me once that he was your bowling coach. Well, hang on, you do that as well, do you? So it's interesting that he not only has coached you, but has taken you through, and from when you first started bowling leg breaks, because we all automatically think of Warnie, right? So let's just go to Warnie for a sec. But you would have had a relationship with him, not only being an Australian leg spinner, but through the Melbourne Stars in the Big Bash as well. Quite different personalities, I suppose, on face value, but nevertheless, how important was he to you, not just as a role model, but actually as you were finished?
Yeah, it was obviously growing up when I decided to make that change as a 15-year-old. He was obviously one that I wanted to emulate. I tried to bowl exactly like him. The show that he put on the ground, the whole Hasselhoff theory that he used to speak about, even if you get for six, you have your chest out. I took a lot from that as a young guy, and interesting relationship with Warnie. Like I didn't work with him as much as I thought that I probably should have or could, and I never used to know if he thought I was any good either, to be honest. But I think by the time, unfortunately he passed away, I think he was coming around to maybe thinking I was all right. And then was one of those, I've said it to someone before, it was one of those relationships with Warnie that I always thought it might be, something that happens later down the track. Like, I've always been quite guarded with who I use as a coach, and I try and get rid of all the bullshit that's told to me and try and take some of the good stuff. And Warnie, I always thought, give it a year or two, I reckon I'll be working with him more often. And then unfortunately he passed away, so I never really got as close as I would have liked to with him, which is pretty sad. Like, yeah, it was one of those things where it was sad that he passed away, and I was pretty emotional about it. And then that was one thing I automatically thought about, was like, okay, like never really got that opportunity, unfortunately.
What sort of people do or have been the voices you've been willing to listen to as you've been filtering out? Who are the handful of people who that say it's not going well? You can pick up the phone and get objective analysis on what you're doing, and knowing you'll.
Trent, he was a relationship that you kind of go from your father as your coach, and then you need that extra voice to, even if they're saying the same things as that your dad's telling you, the fact it's from a different voice is always nice. And he was that person from a young age and even to now. And then, I love working with Dan Vittori. He's the current Australian spin bowling coach, and he's someone that I lean on. Andrew McDonald, he's the head coach of the Australian team now, but someone that I worked closely with and respected a lot from a young age in South Australia. We went to South Australia the same year. I was 21 and he might have been like 32 towards the back end of his Shield career. There's been numerous, but if I was to say two names at the moment, it's definitely still Trent Woodhill and then the other one's Dan Vittori.
Yeah, so timing's worked in a way with these guys who you trust. They've had positions of authority, but I guess it wasn't always that way for you. You've talked about your South Coast upbringing. Maybe we go to that just briefly, about like, what did it look like when you were a kid running around? Was it the traditional backyard, front driveway, siblings, dad, kids in the street? Is that quintessential Australian upbringing we hear for so many Aussie cricketers? Is that you as well?
Yeah, 100%. I was as suburban upbringing as you can imagine. It was front yard, paved driveway. People that have seen me bat a little bit, and they probably not many people have the last few years, but I'm a strong offside player, and that's because the fence was right in the way on the leg side, and you had to score all your runs through the offside. But yeah, I grew up, weatherboard house, 100 metres from the beach. He was at the ocean most days, and then I was making Dad throw me balls at Oakley Park in Warilla, and if he wasn't throwing balls to me there, he was bowling to me in the driveway or facing me in the front driveway. And then I played for a club called Warilla Kookaburras. I was really blessed. It was only an hour and a half south of Sydney, so I had a lot of guys who had played a lot of Sydney grade cricket, and so it's pretty good competition. And then they come back and play for Warilla, so there was a lot of like good voices around for me, and a lot of people to look up to, I guess, when I was really young, say 9, 10, 11 years of age. And then you play all the underage stuff, under 10s, under 12s, and then by the time I think I got to the end of under 12s, the start of under 14s, I was playing men's cricket. So it was typical, like, you can imagine how small I was when I was 12 or 13. And that's when I wanted to be an opening batsman. So I had the chest guard on, everything, and I could hold the stick, and guys would try and bowl pretty slow, and then they thought they'd be able to get me out, and then I was hanging in there for a bit, and then they'd get a little bit quicker, a little bit shorter as well. So yeah, it was a great upbringing, like playing cricket in the country. It was, no one really held back, which probably held me in good stead for then going to junior representative stuff, and then eventually Sydney grade cricket at a pretty young age.
And that's the vault, of course, into representative cricket, Aussie 19s. I mean, it's a pretty well-worn path, right, what you've been able to do, and natural talent getting you to that point. But then it stalls a wee bit for you at New South Wales initially. You've got blokes who are ahead of you in the queue, Steve O'Keefe, who probably was captain then, Steve Smith, who was still very much bowling. Nathan Horrocks would have been near enough to the test squad in that time as well, and you get a bit of a chance a couple of years on after getting a contract. But when Nathan Lyon moves to New South Wales, you see fit to go the other way to South Australia. It's, I guess in footy terms, like a trade, but that's where you really start getting a move on, moving to Adelaide, making the most of a chance at South Australia. I mean, your reflections a decade on from how important that was for you.
Yeah, my honest reflections of that are, like, there's a part of me that wonders if I was in too much of a rush, but I wouldn't like take away anything that I've achieved either. So, like, I don't know if the move that I did make to South Australia has been helpful for where I am now. It was tough. Like, when I look back to my time at New South Wales, my first 3 years there, it's a total generation ago of players and people who were playing Test cricket and guys who it felt really dog-eat-dog kind of world, which I don't think, and I'd hope that people wouldn't experience as much when they come into state squads these days, but I really didn't enjoy playing or being around the older guys in New South Wales when I was young. I'm happy to be honest about that. I felt like there weren't many people that had your best interest at heart. Yeah, that's like a pretty candid way to talk about it. But I look back on South Australia as a good opportunity. Whether I was good enough or not to leave and play that much Shield cricket, probably not. But there's a part of me that thinks maybe that was good for me. Like, I went to South Australia, I wasn't that good yet, but the way that I kind of got through some tough Shield years and then turned into more of a white ball specialist was kind of where I see that kind of move.
You hear a lot of people say that towards the end of their career. I reckon that they wish it could be easier for the next generation to not experience it in quite the same way, jumping forward a bit here. But now as one of the senior players around the country, not just the circuit in T20 cricket, but when you play for New South Wales or when you're in a BBL dressing room or even with younger bowlers for Australia, you're quite aware and what your responsibilities are to help them make sure they have the best experience they can.
Yeah, I'd hope so. Like, there's probably some years in South Australia when I got a little bit older that I regret maybe how some of the young guys probably thought it was like coming into that group. But in terms of how I feel about how I would treat that situation now is much different. I'd like to feel like being a senior player in the Australian team and, the squad's changing now. There's young guys coming through that they feel like they're able to be really comfortable in the dressing room. And I say it about this New South Wales team when I was really young, but when I first started playing for Australia as well at the age of 23 or 24, I didn't really feel that comfortable in my own skin in that change room either.
That South Australia era seems quite fun. You look back at it now, the Matador Barbecue Cup on together every day. Was it like the Channel 9 secondary network was running every game live, bit of a carnival atmosphere. But you were on telly, right? I mean, you were bowling in games where you were doing well, you moved states, ticking over, playing against the CA11, the Caxi, along the way there. But you're pretty young. And again, this is what you used to be. And Aussies love a leggy, don't they, right? A leggy doing well. You can see why you were given the chance to lead the queue. There's something intangible about it, but we as a nation just love the idea of young leg spin talent coming through. And as you say, you picked your first Aussie squads when you're 23.
Yeah, there was a few of us that got a crack actually when we were quite young. There was obviously myself, Cameron Boyce, James Muirhead, and it was like, give the guys a crack in white ball cricket to potentially then. I think they were always envisioning that there would be a leg spinner play Test cricket. That was the kind of vibe that I felt. But obviously with the career that Nate's had, it's been really hard. It's basically been impossible for anyone to get a crack, which is absolutely fine as well. But yeah, it was a couple of young guys that got a crack, and I think out of those three, or there might have been another one in there as well that got a game. You got to. When you're not one of the greats of the game, I think you've got like a small window that you need to kind of take your opportunities. And I was lucky enough that I'd got a couple of opportunities that I'd then taken. Hence why I've played so much for Australia now. But yeah, like looking back to that time, they definitely wanted a young blonde leggy to kind of take over. But I don't think it's possible to. You look back on what Warnie did in his career as a leg spinner. It's you look around Test cricket now. There's hardly a leg spinner playing, particularly in these seam-friendly surfaces like Australia and England. There's just doesn't happen. So you look back on what Warnie did, it's ridiculous.
Just to close off on South Australia, your experience there in Adelaide, there's a quote that I've written from a political documentary I watched a million years ago, which was Adelaide is different, discuss and the vibe in that city. Did it agree with you? I mean, as you were developing as a human being, forget about cricket, but as you were becoming who you are today, did Adelaide play a bit of a role in that? Or do you feel like there's a piece to this?
Adelaide. I'll sure I'll look back with some fond memories, but I definitely won't rush back. There's probably parts of my relationship with my current wife that I, look back on fondly. We bought a nice house in the hills together, and I really enjoyed that aspect of life for a couple of years. But when I look back at what my life looks like now, it's not even, it's chalk and cheese. Like, I don't think I was ever truly happy or, being the best version of myself or, even having a proper crack at cricket. Adelaide. If I was to answer your correct question directly, I'd say Adelaide. No, didn't do it for me.
And then your life goes on this different path anyway, I guess, because you go from being a state cricketer to being an Australian cricketer, and naturally there's less room for you to play state cricket. What's interesting looking back at it is that I was at your debut at the Cake Tin in Wellington in early 2016, but you played tours in New Zealand, the Windies, Sri Lanka, South Africa before you even play a game for Australia. In Australia, there's quite a lot of white ball cricket during the year of 2016. You talked about your impressions of walking into that setting and not quite feeling it early on. The other thing I remember at the time, you did look quite small. Like, you looked like a small person. You didn't look like the kind of guy that goes and turns out plays in a game for Australia. You didn't look the same way you do now in many ways, I suppose. But have you had, I guess, a chance to reflect on who you were when you first started being Adam Zampa Australia?
No, not really. Like, I've seen photos of that game and watched highlights of it a few times. You look back on the little things, getting your cap from Alan Border, like, absolutely great memory for me, seeing photos and footage of it, but I don't remember a thing he said just because I was shitting myself so much. Didn't really think I was good enough. Like, looking back on it now, maybe back then, if you asked me, I probably would have said, yeah, fuck yeah, like, I'm ready to go. But did I truly believe it? No. Did I think I'd play as much for Australia as I have? Definitely not. So I guess if you add all that up, you'd probably look back and go, like, I had no idea what I was doing there and how I got there. But yeah, I honestly don't know myself now compared to what I was like back then. I couldn't even tell you. Right.
Interesting. So because you look at it objectively, you have a pretty good time of it when you start. It's a couple of games in Sri Lanka, Colombo, Dambulla, where you're influential in winning games for Australia. David Warner's captain, of course. Smith goes home, Warner takes over. What was that like, by the way, playing for Australia under Dave, who had the Midas touch every bowling change he made in that series, and you were involved in a lot of them, seemingly turned into a wicket. And you win the series coming from behind.
Davey, unfortunately, with the events that happened, hasn't had more leadership opportunities, but the little that I did play under him, I really enjoyed it. And obviously, it is potentially easier being interim captain for a series, but the series that he did come in, I felt, his communication and his directness and his ability to ask for what he wanted out of you was really great. And obviously, you look back at that time and, we haven't touched on this yet, but I lived with Davey as well, so we had a bit of a connection from that, and it was good. I actually don't really remember it that well, those series, but I do remember Davey's leadership, and as I said, it's unfortunate that he just didn't get more opportunities in the end.
So you were roommates. I got this right. Were you club cricket first time around when you New South Wales contract, or before that?
So he just started playing Test cricket, and we had the same agent. And I was moving up from the South Coast, and I said I needed a place to live, and he was like, "Come live with me." And I had this house close to the beach in Little Bay in the eastern suburbs, and he was hardly home. which was nice because when he was home, it was fucking mayhem. Mayhem. Yeah, just he'd go away for 6 weeks on an Aussie tour, he'd come back, and I'd lock myself in my bedroom because his house parties were, not for me.
Yeah, it feels like, as you say, you can't recognise some of your own traits from years gone by. I'm sure you say a version of that as well. Yeah, in the middle of that 2016, by the way, we shouldn't gloss over your very unusual start to IPL cricket, playing from the rising Pune. 6 from...
Might have been second game, yeah.
And, I think they're still might be wrong here, someone will correct me. I think they're the best figures ever in a losing side in a T20 match, something like that. Playing under Doty and running amok, and suddenly, you're for a minute at least, you're an IPL superstar, having not been playing international cricket for more than a few months.
Yeah, that was like, I had a bit of international experience before that, so then the IPL was something I definitely wanted to be a part of, and then went through like every emotion in that first year. Was how good is this to be a part of? I'm sick of this. Like, get me home, I'm not playing. And then it was, here's your debut, the bowler Virat, probably for the first time. You get AB de Villiers out. The umpire disagreed, but I got him out twice in the first 2 balls he faced. And then the next game, it's 6 for, and you're like, how good? Can't wait for next year. They're obviously going to pick me up next year because I've just gotten 6 for, and you go and you're like, all right, just got to have a solid year. And they'll look back on my 6 for from 2 years ago and pay me $2 million this year. How good? And then I had a stinker. And never got $1 million payday, unfortunately, from the IPL. But that was honestly my attitude. I was like, how good? Just got 6 for. I'm going to make so much money out of this. But unfortunately, hasn't panned out.
It is kind of weird you've not played more IPL. I know some of it's been your choice, and that's totally commendable that you've been able to pick and choose a little bit. If you look back at your IPL record, it's threadbare. And I know that you made, Kane Richardson, I think as well, made that call to come home early in 2021. There were reports then that you'll never be invited back. I know the tournament was paused like 4 weeks later because of the dreadful effect of COVID having through.
It was only 4 days later as well. Yeah. It was a good decision. Don't worry.
But do you think that there is a little bit of that residual? That bloke, put himself before, or is that was too much read into that at the time?
Yeah, there's a lot read into it. I think I've pulled out of 2 IPLs, and one of them was that one. The other one was this season. So I feel like there might be a bit of an attitude that I pull out of a lot of IPLs. But looking back on the IPL that Kane and I pulled out of. We'd done a week's quarantine into India, turn on the telly, and it's the ABC channel in India, and it's talking about how bad the COVID situation is in India. And we're like, God, if they're talking about the COVID situation in India, in Australia, it mustn't be good. So we looked at each other and we're like, what do you want to do? Like, if we get stuck in India and can't get home, like, what's that look like? He's got a young family, and we're already jaded from really hard year from quarantine and COVID and everything anyway. So I was pretty tired already. And then we were sitting by the pool one day, and someone ran up to us and asked for our autograph, and a security guard came running after him, and we were like, if it's that easy to burst the bubble and there's that much COVID outside, there's no way this competition's lasting more than this week. And we were like, it's a bit of a risk. We'll go tell the owners what we think, and we'll try and get home, see what they say. The RCB owner at the time looks at us and goes, there's no way that your own country will lock you out. And we're like, I think they might. You don't know Australia that well. 2 days later, Australians get locked out. We're luckily on this flight from Qatar, from India to Qatar, and then Qatar to Melbourne. But yeah, we just had that feeling that the bubble was going to burst, and we, for whatever reason, were judged for it. But I think the proof's in the pudding. IPL was binned 4 days later, and we were doing our 2 weeks quarantine in Melbourne while the rest of the Aussie blokes were stuck in the Maldives.
I mean, the guys have spoken about their experience. Your fortnight. No. Yeah, you played a World Cup in 2016, do really well. Underbowled, I reckon, in that India game where Kohli wins the thing. You get back home, weirdly get dropped. Like, I guess you're having experiences that young players have, right? Yet to really beat yourself in. Around this time, a perception quickly emerges that you're only a white ball bowler as well. I remember this, that what age you're 24, and it's a sense that, he hasn't taken many first-class wickets over at Adelaide, despite the fact that you've got, Sayers, Worrell, Nettie running a mark and doing the majority of the heavy lifting. But that must have shit you a little bit, that you're so young, yet you're being typecast as being just one thing before you've had a chance to really evolve or grow into what you might be.
Yeah. I mean, when I look back at that time, I maybe just wasn't very good either. Was put in situations that were unfortunately not great for me as well. But overall, I think the combination of those two things, the results weren't coming my way, and people were talking about how bad my record was, and I was thinking about how bad my record was. Was Test cricket a reality for me? Still wanted it to be, but it's kind of going back to the conversation about that move to South Australia and whether it was a good one for me. Did it help my white ball cricket? Definitely. And obviously I'm sitting here playing franchise cricket and with almost 200 white ball games for Australia. And also, I think, realistically, still a chance to play Test cricket. It's I feel okay about it. I mean, if I was playing a lot of Shield cricket right now with the way I'm bowling and the bowler that I am, I think I'd be fine. I'd be doing really well. And the few games that I have played in the last couple of years are suggestive of that. It's absolutely fine. People, even if I do get picked in the upcoming subcontinent tours, people are always going to say, well, his record's averaging 46 with the ball, it's not good enough. People will say that, I'm sure, but if I do get picked, I'll know that, I feel like the way that I'm bowling, it'll be fun.
Skipping back to 2019, you weren't in England the 2018 series post Sandpaper, so I guess you're not here for the most raw bit post Sandpaper era. But as Justin Langer's arrival, suppose the common wisdom now is that he was the coach Australia acquired in 2018 to shake things up and to play things in a slightly more disciplined way, and the team subsequently outgrew him. Interested in your perspective on how it felt playing under Langer, especially in 2019, into a World Cup where you were pretty well positioned. I remember how well you bowled in India against Pakistan, but then 4 games into the World Cup, and been replaced by Nathan Lyon, which I think if you asked 100 punters in the pub who was Australia's white ball sprint in the 2019 World Cup, they'd say, I probably remembers that transition happened mid-tournament. But nevertheless, that Langer era, early Langer era, when you don't quite get to where you want to be at the pinnacle of the cycle, that being 50 over World Cup in England.
Yeah, I potentially don't disagree that JL was the right call at the time. We'd gone through Sandpaper, we'd gone through some really rough white ball stuff as well. We'd gone through so many different 11s in white ball cricket in particular. I was like, what are we doing? And maybe he did come in and bring a bit of directive and that kind of old school, let's get fit, let's be good in the field, let's do the simple things right. And yeah, absolutely good call, I think. And then you look back a few years, we'll talk about JL and look back a few years and you go, well, Andrew McDonald's the next coach, and I think it was the perfect amount of time where you go from a direct guy who gave us what we needed at the time, and then we basically, if you go through the 3 11s, the Australian team, they're basically all the same 11 for a while now. So you go, all right, how do we then become better tactically? How do we become, a team that then goes on and wins World Cups or whatever? So, yeah, I think definitely the right call at the time. Looking back to my, 2019 World Cup, am it's still really disappointed in the fact that I wasn't given more opportunities in that World Cup, for sure. Was I again, maybe wasn't bowling as well as I could have, but again, didn't feel as back as I did from 2020 onwards. I think a year later, 6 months later, it changed a bit. George Bailey came into the conversation. Andrew McDonald was around a little bit more, and before that it was, I played that World Cup 2019, and I was led to believe that the World Cup final and the World Cup semi-final was still an option for me. When I got dropped, it was all about matchups. Who are we playing against is going to matter. And then the 11 didn't change once, and I think 4 of us were sitting there during the World Cup semi-final looking at the team going, this is not going to change, is it? This is the 11. They were leading us on a little bit. So, I think that 2019 World Cup could definitely have been dealt with a lot better from coaching staff in particular.
Quite a bit of changes at the end of that World Cup. I suppose it could have been a crossroads moment. Do you used to know? But COVID, everything stops, right? And it's almost like there's a reset after COVID and other things as well. You've moved to fire, and so stories say you were bowling on a club pitch to get your loads up and all the rest of it before going on that tour of England in 2020, the lockdown tour, the bizarre lockdown tour, which a lot of your teammates have spoken about. But spoken about in reference to how important it was to getting that white ball team to where it needed to be and developing your own identity a little bit. I remember looking out the window and then we hit Manchester Hotel where we were all kind of bunking together, us on one half, you on the other. You had a picnic blanket out in the middle, music blaring, basically having a picnic. You don't interpret the Aussie team historically as being that way, yet you were comfortable that way. And it wasn't just you, by the way, it's you and half a dozen others. But you were doing a thing with that team that made it feel more in the mould of you than it was when you rocked up 6 or 7 years before.
Yeah, I think that was potentially the start of it for sure. You go from outside of cricket where, you come to a place like England and the first thing you do is with another mate, you go to a cafe or you go to a pub and have a beer, or 3 of you go to dinner. And I think lockdown forced us all to be together naturally. There'd be 15 bloke in one person's room giving someone a haircut. It'd be the funniest thing you've ever seen. Or we'd have a few beers on the ground or whatever, but we were all forced to be around each other. And that kind of, looking back on 2020 and 2021 was massive for our group. Like we all got to know each other really well. We all kind of all had the same reasons for playing for each other and all had the same ultimate goal in the end. 2020, that at Manchester, and even beating England at the time, we beat them in the one-day series. And I don't honestly think we thought we could. And then once we did, we were like, okay, maybe this is a good team that we've just beaten. And then, you look forward a year after that, it was probably proof of the pudding that we're actually a good team.
You personally, in Sierra, come more into the public eye because of the Test documentary. And now I know it's only a vignette. I know it's only a small thing, but fuck, you must get asked, God knows how often, oh, so you like a bit of coffee, do you? Like it's a personality trait liking coffee. Do you feel like almost, it's hard done by the right phrase, I don't know, but that because of the way it presented you in that brief segment of the documentary, that now people actually think they know you for a couple of things. Yeah, you'd mates with Marcus Stoyne as fuck, who isn't, right, in that team. He's obviously a very popular guy in the Aussie setup, but that some bits of media then gave people a very typecast impression of you being the most alternative bloke to ever walk here.
I have a feeling that people probably thought that about me anyway. They thought I was rare or, whatever word they were using. Still to this day, people will come up, I love that Test documentary, like, have you found a good cafe? And it's fine. Like, I'd rather people want to talk to me about that than, cricket sometimes. Like, it's absolutely fine. But, yeah, it was like, there's some of that documentary that I, potentially regret a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure about the Test documentary. If it's how real it is. I haven't watched the last 2 seasons, but I've watched the first season and I look back on it and go like, yes, potentially a bit fake.
But there's the term for it, isn't it? The when you're being observed, how you change your behaviour when someone's watching it. That one's called that.
Yeah.
But I guess that bolsters, like you say, the impression, because you're in a long-term vegan. I know as someone that doesn't eat meat either, that it prompts so many questions and like people are so, that's not everyone, but a lot of people are so curious about that part of your life. But you've taken it to another level, doing advertisements for people for the ethical treatment of animals and being a bit of a standard bearer, I suppose, in the sporting world. And that also reflects the changing face of Aussie cricket, the way that Pat put his head above the parapet around what advertising you guys would be comfortable with on the playing shirts and so on. Like, kind of all goes to an idea that you're part of a team that are doing things that other Australian teams just wouldn't have had on their radar, and you're front and centre of that.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about a hell of a lot. Like, I've felt comfortable in my own skin. I've felt uncomfortable in my own skin, and whether or not some of my acts have made a difference in what other people do, then potentially, like, great. But I'd like to think that, the whole setup that we've got with the Australian team now, it makes it really comfortable for anyone to come in and be whoever they want. If Jake Fraser-McGurk wants to come in and be Baby Bull, then, and we need to put him up on that kind of pedestal, then absolutely fine, we'll do it if it gets the best out of him and that's what makes him feel comfortable. Yeah, great. But yeah, I feel like the environment that we've created, whether or not it's from Pat being woke or myself being myself, then great.
Does any of the online stuff penetrate your mainframe? Like when Australia lose, that tends to be, Australia have lost, therefore they're too woke, therefore they're a bunch of whatever. And it is pervasive, it is loud, it is noisy online. Have you found a way just to label that out, or does it, some players it cuts through clearly which can?
I've made it clear that I keep receipts, but in terms of like performance on and off the field, and like I separate that from what people actually think of people as human beings, and Pat and his voice, what he does outside of the game, I find it interesting. Some people won't. Some people will get into him about it, and some people will be supportive. Like, I've got my head around that. There'll be some people that are unhappy about everything in the world. So, I don't know.
Another thinking of being at this dad and other parts of your life, and fill your bucket, and not needing to get the dopamine hit and whatever happens online. It's got to be a part of it too.
Yeah, definitely. I even said it. I actually said this to my wife this morning. I was thinking about, playing another game, thinking about the game the other night and how much of a kick I used to get out of a game like that. And I still do, like the atmosphere and everything like that included. It was a great game, but there's nothing that beats like a simple day with your family and your boy in the morning. And I used to really ride the wave of my performance and everything like that. But now I'm really comfortable with decisions I've made and where I'm at with my career, that like I can get 3 for 11 off 4 overs and still feel like it's whatever. Like, it doesn't matter that much. Yeah, it feels great, and I love being a part of this team and all that stuff. But still, whether or not it's just the fact that I'm wanting more out of the game, if I want to win another World Cup or winning World Cups and having a child and stuff like that, just makes you feel like you're more, where you expected to be or wanted to be. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer, but I feel really comfortable with that.
And that balance, equilibrium must help when things aren't going as well. Think of the World Cup last year when you and others weren't getting the results you would have wanted, 2 heavy losses. Talk about keeping receipts, might come back to that in a sec, but you go on a ridiculous run, 4 for 4 for 4 for 3 for 3 for, suddenly you'd be in the guy right in the middle of Australia's run to the final and win the thing. Really important performance in the middle overs of the final, only conceding 1 boundary when the screws were being tightened, and being able to hold up that trophy so unexpectedly that night, 2 World Cups in the space of a couple of years and so on. Whether you could have turned the corner as well as you did if you weren't at this place in your life where you're able to separate the roller coaster of emotions from.
Yeah, I guess even you like fast forward another month before that and we're in South Africa and I get hit for the world record.
Yeah, it's got to say that. Like played a role at some level, right? And then you get hit around against India and South Africa in the World Cup. Like maybe an earlier version of you takes that and struggles to recover from it, right?
Certainly, yeah. Like that none for 113 I got back to my hotel room that night and I literally poured myself a whiskey and I was devastated and I was like, how did that happen? But I think my ability to work out what happened, and literally I woke up the next day and I was like, the world will end up on its correct vortex again, don't worry. And then I bowled to Heine again the next game and cleaned him up second ball. And I was like, okay, I can be all right. And I don't know if, as a younger guy, I would have been able to handle that, but I got hit for the world record and the next day I was like, it's sweet. So I kind of had that to lean on during the World Cup. I'd known that I was able to bounce back from something that was pretty horrible. And then, you go to the World Cup and I think it's just that ultra competitiveness. I was hurting, I had back spasms, but I was like, I fucking want this more than anything. So let's just get through it.
The receipt keeping, which you made a point of on Instagram after it was over and after you won the thing, I guess objectively, you and Mature as senior players know the criticism is normal and healthy and fine. But it feels like, tell me if I've got this right, where you guys really feel it is when it's guys that used to play for Australia who go ball in, who are doing it in a way that does seem to feel almost personal. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yeah, the way that I see it is almost when ex-players come out, it's almost like they're talking about it on a big WhatsApp group or something. Let's all back each other up and say the same shit. But there was a bit of time there where people were going really hard for us, and for a Australian cricketer and looking forward to what I think I'm going to be like when I'm done, I'm like, what are they doing? Just be thoughtful and actually try and help and understand what it's like to be professional cricketers. You fucking did it already. So why are you being such a fuckwit about it? Hence the keep the receipts. And I kept receipts. Ex-players, what are they saying about us? As soon as we win these World Cups, luckily being part of two now, and I get to sing the team song and I lead it basically with those receipts, and the boys absolutely love it.
Was there another part of that World Cup win, that being India? I know they said 100,000, but 90-odd thousand there at Ahmedabad Stadium, and you're aware of the wider world around you. You know way things are at the moment, the way the game's going, the direction of travel, so on and so forth, that just made it sweeter than any other victory.
Yeah, I think looking back on that World Cup, and I feel like, and I reckon a lot of other people probably feel like, that India were given the World Cup basically on a platter, and it was like something miraculous has to happen for anyone else to win it. 120,000 Indians, and as I said, it just felt like it was there for India to take, and the satisfaction of walking off the ground and having them only get 240, it was like, all right, is this possible? And then the whole emotion of being three down, the ball swinging and nipping everywhere, it was difficult innings to watch. But as soon as Hetty and Marnus locked in, it was honestly so satisfying. And to beat India in front of that many people, I don't think you can ever beat that feeling.
And I guess the great thing about white ball cricket, you guys didn't have a great tournament recently in the Caribbean, but there's a Champions Trophy next year, T20 World Cup the year after that. Then you'll gear up presumably for the 50 over World Cup after that, given you're only 32 and you've got time on your side on that front. It's the nice thing about having a squatted transition, but you head overnight, making mates again, Maxwell, Cummins, etc. The core, if you like, you'll still be able to duke it out.
Yeah, definitely. I think, as disappointing as the T20 World Cup was, and, I was devastated for a couple of weeks that we didn't have a decent crack at that and go further, but, we're great squad. And then the young guys coming through in the depth. It's exciting for those tournaments coming up, and even, we're one-day world champions, and we are for the next 3 years, so sit back and enjoy that still.
Got to go to training in a sec. So, last question. We've kind of gone through the whole journey of you in cricket to the extent you can, 49 minutes. Let's forget about 5 years' time, because that can be sometimes a difficult question to answer. But when this is over, like when the merry-go-round stops and you go out do something else in your life and not go leg spin or are you a stick or twist kind of guy? Are you a stay in the game, coach media, or do you think that you're probably I'll take an interest in the game, but I'll do something else with the rest of them?
I've thought about this a bit. When I was younger, I would have definitely said no, cricket's not for me. Now, with where I am, I've thought about what it could potentially look like. I don't think media's for me. I've tried the commentary and I can't watch cricket for that long. And that was a T20 game, so I couldn't do anything that was longer. But I can see myself potentially working with young spinners. Like I love that side of the game. I love the way that you have to think about it, the tactical side of, and also just like the fact that you have so many different kinds of spinners. I love the idea of working with that. When I was younger, it was like every spinner had to bowl like Warnie, and I think that's changing now. People are respecting that everyone does it differently. So I think if I was going to stay in the game, it's going to be from my farm somehow, but it's also going to be pretty specific. And I think about young Tanvi Sanger coming through. I'd love to, if he wanted to, work with him quite a bit, and other young spinners coming through.
Well, you've given a lot to the game already. Clearly, a lot more to give. You've been terrific over the last, as I say, 50 minutes or so. Adam Zampa, thanks for being part of the final word.
Nice, thanks, Adam. Cheers, mate.